Hey, so I know that speaking on the phone can be quite stressful in English. So today we are talking about some things you can do to help you speak more naturally and more confidently on the phone in English. I know that nowadays you can email, you can message, you can communicate via chat. However, there are times when you do have to speak on the phone. You simply cannot avoid a phone call. And so these tips will help you to speak more confidently and more naturally. First of all, take your time. Don't feel like you have to rush your words or speak really, really fast. I know that a lot of people feel that native English speakers speak quickly, so in order to sound more native, you have to speak quickly as well, but that's simply not the case. Of course, you cannot speak extremely unnecessarily slowly. Just try to speak at a natural, calm, and relaxed pace. This will also help you to stay calm and keep your stress levels down, as well as give you time to think about what you have to say, and it will be easier for your listener to follow. So take your time. Next, speak clearly. Speak clearly. Make sure you enunciate or clearly pronounce your words. Do not stress about your accent, and it's okay if you feel like your pronunciation is not perfect. Just try to speak clearly and pay attention to whether the other person understands you or not. When it comes to pronunciation, a lot of people mix up or confuse pronunciation with accent. All of us have accents depending on our native language, depending on where we're from, and that is totally okay. You can speak English with your accent. It's completely fine as long as you make sure that your pronunciation is clear. And how do you know if your pronunciation is clear? As long as people understand you, that's a pretty decent measure of whether your pronunciation is clear or not. So again, we're not talking about being absolutely perfect, and on a short phone call, you don't have to be perfect or wait until you have perfect pronunciation to make a phone call. That's impossible. So just make sure that you are being as clear as you possibly can. Another thing that's really going to help you with your phone calls is listening carefully. In fact, listening is just as important as speaking on the phone. It's very important to pay attention to the context or the topic and listen carefully to the information that the person is relaying or sharing with you, and listen carefully to their tone. Sometimes you might misunderstand or mishear a few words here and there. The other person might be using vocabulary or expressions that you are not aware of or not familiar with, and that's okay. Of course, you're not going to interrupt them and say, I don't know what that means, or what does that mean, depending on the phone call, of course. If you're talking to a friend, that's okay. But in a more professional situation, that might not be appropriate. And in those cases, when you cannot really ask the person what that means, or you don't have time to look up a word or translate something, it's really going to help you to listen carefully to the context or the overall topic or the situation that you're discussing, and to pay close attention to the person's tone, right? The tone is going to help you understand their emotion, how they are feeling, and how the situation and the conversation is going. So don't forget that listening is just as important as speaking. Make sure you listen very carefully and keep in mind the context, the topic, and the tone. Next, keep it simple. I know that you might be tempted to use more complicated grammatical structures or fancy new vocabulary that you have learned, and that's totally fine if you're confident that you can use it correctly. However, if you're someone who tends to get nervous on the phone, or phone calls are not the easiest for you, don't make a phone call more complicated than it has to be. Keep it simple and use simple language as much as you can. This way, your message will be clear and your listener will understand you. So don't be afraid to just keep things simple. Next, confirm when you need to. So don't be afraid to ask for confirmation or clarification. if you aren't 100% sure that you've understood or heard correctly. And what you can do is learn a few simple and common and useful phrases that you can use in any conversation to do this. For instance, you could use phrases like this. Just to clarify, you said, and then repeat whatever you understood. Or just to be sure, you're asking for whatever you think they're asking for. Is that correct? Okay, so these are a couple of examples. Or you can also repeat back what the speaker said to you. For example, so you'd like to book an appointment with Mr. White next Thursday at 5 o'clock. Okay, so maybe they called you and they said, I would like to book an appointment with Mr. White next Thursday at 5 o'clock. You can simply repeat and confirm that. So sometimes you want to just repeat the statement back to your speaker, or you want to ask for clarification if you weren't 100% sure, okay? You can also use phrases like, sorry, I didn't quite catch that. I didn't quite catch that. Now, this could mean that you didn't fully understand it or you didn't really hear it. Because a lot of times there's noise, background noise, or you kind of lose signal on the phone. So it's not just about not understanding. Sometimes you just can't hear someone. So don't be afraid to confirm or clarify. Next, be polite. Now, when you are speaking to someone on the phone, you cannot see them. So you lose the element of body language or visual connection, right? You only have verbal communication to rely on. So you might come across or sound rude or unfriendly unintentionally. Of course, you don't want to sound rude, you don't want to sound unfriendly, but depending on your tone, depending on your word choice, you may unintentionally sound a little rude. So you want to make sure that you are using polite and courteous phrases like please, thank you, sorry to cut you off, sorry to interrupt you. These type of phrases are going to make you sound a lot friendlier. Now, before we continue, this lesson is about speaking on the phone, and that is a very important skill to have. But I have also created a free ebook for you to help you improve your general English conversations in pretty much any situation. It's free. It's called English Conversations Made Simple. Just click the link below this lesson, enter your details, and I will send you your copy. A really important one is to be prepared, especially for important phone calls. Now, whenever possible, prepare yourself for a phone call ahead of time in English. It doesn't matter who the phone call is with or what the phone call is regarding. If you are prepared for the call, you will be more confident and you will speak more naturally. So for example, let's say that you have to make a call to the bank. Maybe you have some questions about some charges on your account, or you want to open or close an account, whatever the case may be. Prepare for the call ahead of time. Write down phrases that you are going to need, questions you might need to ask, vocabulary that you might forget. Practice actually having this conversation either on your own or with a friend if possible. I know that's not always possible, but practice, literally practice saying the phrases that you write down out loud, okay? It's not easy to go into a phone call unprepared, especially when you are nervous. So just write down the things that you don't want to forget, right? The person on the phone cannot see that you're reading, so it really does not matter. Be prepared. Another time that you really need to be prepared is if you have a phone interview for a job, right? Of course, you want to prepare potential answers, questions, things that you don't want to forget ahead of time. So whenever possible, prepare yourself for the call. This will really, really help you. Another tip is do not be afraid to ask for help if you really need it. Now, earlier I said that you can't always, translate a word or a phrase or ask the person to explain it, of course, depending on the situation. But let's say that there's just one important word that you really cannot hear or you really cannot understand, and you just do not understand the phrase and you're just stuck. You're just stuck in the conversation. Don't be afraid to ask the speaker to please repeat the word for you, or to please spell it, or tell them, sorry, I really didn't catch that word. Would you mind repeating the last word of the last sentence, okay? If it is that you cannot continue the call and you know that this word is important, in that case, of course, it's okay to ask them to repeat and to ask for help. I'm just saying that you don't want to overdo that. You don't want to overdo it. If there's a lot of words that you don't understand, of course, they can't explain every single thing. That might not be appropriate. But if you think that the word or phrase is really, really important, just ask them to explain it to you. I'm sure they'll be happy to help. Next, follow up with an email after important phone calls. Now, this is a good practice, especially in professional situations. It's very common to send an email summarizing a professional phone call. This is for a couple of reasons. First of all, you don't have record of the phone call and you want to make sure that nobody forgets what was discussed, right? Or you might have some action points that you need to take action on and you want to have those in writing, of course, so you can keep a record moving forward. So for example, let's say that I have a phone call with a colleague of mine about a project that we're working on together. And on the phone, we discuss some changes that we have to make. Rather than us just having this information in our head and trying to remember it, a great practice would be for me to then send an email following our phone call, right? So we have everything in writing, nice and clearly laid out. So you could write an email that starts like this. It was a pleasure chatting with you today. Following our phone call, I'd like to summarize the points we went over and then go ahead and make a summary of whatever you discussed, all right? So it's a very simple email, again, just to create this physical record of the phone call that you had. And finally, you want to learn how to handle stressful situations. So let's say that you receive a phone call and you're not prepared for this call and you just panic in the middle of the call because it's difficult, you don't know what to say, you don't fully understand, you don't know how to answer the questions. You need to learn how to handle this situation. And there's a couple of things that you can do. First of all, you can put your caller on hold, politely put your caller on hold, just regroup, try to understand what's going on in the conversation, and then continue the call. If that's not an option, you can also say that this is not the best time. Would you mind calling me back at whatever time? Or you can say that you're in the middle of something, or you're in the middle of a meeting or driving or whatever, and you can arrange a time to call that person back. Or you can arrange a time to return the call. You can say, would you mind if I called you back this evening at 5 o'clock? Or would it be possible for us to have this call in another time, all right? So if you really go into panic mode, don't feel like you just have to stay on the phone and you don't know what to say and you don't know what to do. You can always hang up and call back later or have them call you back later. Don't just hang up in the middle of the call. Of course, ask them to hold on a minute. I have experienced this before where I've had phone calls where I know that the other person didn't fully understand, or they had some issues with English or challenges communicating in English on the phone, and they just hung up because they were in a panic. So you don't want to do that. It's very hard to call back later. Instead, sound intentional. Just ask them to hold on for one moment, or if necessary, ask them to call back later or let them know that you will call back later. So there you have it. Those are some tips to help you have more natural and confident conversations on the phone, if you have to have conversations on the phone as well. Of course, we do have a lot of other options nowadays. We can email, we can chat, and so on. But like I said, sometimes we just have to speak on the phone. So we might as well be ready for it, right? So hopefully these tips helped you. And if you have any others that you would like to share, please drop those in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, learning, and spending time with me today. I'll see you very soon in another one.